tcp-academy.teachable.com. You may also find us on YouTube at CSEC Biology TCP. Send us a mail, it's at extremesolutionsja@gmail.com. Homostasis. What comes to mind? Homostasis is the body's way of maintaining a constant internal environment. This ensures that conditions are at optimum for the body to operate properly. If a constant internal condition is not maintained, the individual will fall ill or may die. One can relate to this. Having a fever, you really don't want that temperature to keep rising, as the temperature could pretty much damage cells, pretty much could cause the death of the individual. You can also relate to the fact of being in a race and you're running, and at the end of it, you are really tired because you would have used some of the water inside to cool the body, and that must be compensated for. As such, the body uses homeostatic response mechanism to ensure that water is pretty much consumed in order to bring back that water level in the body to optimum. The temperature as well, as your temperature increases when you run, so too the homeostatic response will ensure that that temperature is brought back to normal. As you run, it is also true that you are respiring. In today's lesson, we're going to be looking at homostasis. I am Mr. Wilson from TCP Academy. You can find us at tcp-academy.teachable.com. You may also find us on YouTube at CSEC Biology TCP. Send us a mail, it's at extremesolutionsja@gmail.com. Homostasis. What comes to mind? Homostasis is the body's way of maintaining a constant internal environment. This ensures that conditions are at optimum for the body to operate properly. If a constant internal condition is not maintained, the individual will fall ill or may die. One can relate to this. Having a fever, you really don't want that temperature to keep rising, as the temperature could pretty much damage cells, pretty much could cause the death of the individual. You can also relate to the fact of being in a race and you're running, and at the end of it, you are really tired because you would have used some of the water inside to cool the body, and that must be compensated for. As such, the body uses homeostatic response mechanism to ensure that water is pretty much consumed in order to bring back that water level in the body to optimum. The temperature as well, as your temperature increases when you run, so too the homeostatic response will ensure that that temperature is brought back to normal. As you run, it is also true that you are respiring more. So more carbon dioxide will, of course, be created from the reaction. Hence, more carbon dioxide within the body, and the body is going to do everything to ensure that this comes back to normal. So that is what homeostasis does. It ensures that the body internal condition is pretty much maintained at constant. Now, here are some examples of homeostatic control in the body. So we control blood sugar, it controls temperature, it controls water, it controls the amount of carbon dioxide in the body, it controls the pH, it controls iron, and the ions here, they have been moved by active transport. There is no homeostasis without a feedback mechanism. And pretty much homeostasis is possible, one would say, because of this feedback mechanism. Now, a feedback mechanism are pretty much self-regulatory mechanism that work involuntarily to bring back a condition to operational normal within the body. You want to get right back to normal. In some cases, you might see a feedback mechanism that causes more of something to happen, as in the case of pregnancy and childbirth. We'll talk more about that. But feedback mechanisms are supported by the nervous system and, of course, hormones. Now, the lady in the picture, she's pregnant. And during childbirth, she will experience what is called a positive feedback mechanism where the stretching of the reproductive tract will cause more oxytocin to be secreted. Now, this oxytocin is going to increase the contraction so as to ensure that the baby moves quickly and safely through the birth canal. The picture below, we're seeing a family eating, and this family is pretty much increasing the blood sugar. And because of this increase in blood sugar, then insulin will be secreted that will convert this blood sugar or the blood glucose into glycogen, which is pretty much insoluble, and that will be stored. So a positive feedback mechanism refers to a change in one direction which causes more changes in the same direction. Example, the release of oxytocin during labor, which stimulates the contraction to push the baby through the birth canal. Now, negative feedback mechanism is somewhat different. While in positive feedback mechanism, we are doing more of something to bring about more of another. With negative feedback mechanism, it refers to that change in one direction, which causes a change in the opposite direction. Example, the body detect the blood sugar level is high, right? So it will secrete insulin to lower the blood sugar level, not to get more insulin for more blood sugar, but instead more insulin to ensure less blood sugar. Here we have 4 examples of each. Positive feedback mechanism, more of the same happens. It only lasts for a limited time. And some examples we refer to oxytocin being released during child's birth, the birth canal stretch. And as the birth canal stretch, what will happen is that it will stimulate the production of more oxytocin. Now, another thing one might relate to is having a cut. And as the blood clots, it will stimulate more clotting until the cut finally heals. Another example is a baby suckling, a baby being breastfed. Now, this baby, as long as the baby is on the breast, it will stimulate the production of more milk. So if the mother wants to stop this milk production, she has to remove the baby from the breast. Now, the increased collection of urine in the bladder stretches the bladder, and of such, the bladder will, of course, hold more urine. All 4 are 4 nice examples of positive feedback mechanism. On the other hand, the negative feedback mechanism is less or more of the same, right? So if something is too high, it will cause it to come back to normal, so less. And if it's too low, then more, it will cause it to become high, back to normal. A process that can repeat several times within a day. Blood sugar level too high, insulin is secreted to lower the blood level or lower the blood sugar level. Now the blood sugar level is low, glucagon is secreted to increase the blood sugar level. Now, if a carbon dioxide concentration in the blood is too high, the medulla oblongata increases the rate of breathing to lower the carbon dioxide concentration. This is seen after a race. Now, another thing we could look at is the water concentration in the body. Too little water in the body causes the pituitary gland to release more ADH into the blood. Now, this makes the wall of the kidney tubules, or what we refer to as a nephron, and collecting duct more permeable for the reabsorption of more water from the filtrate. The reverse is also true. If we don't have enough water, it will behave one way, and if we have too much water, the reverse will actually happen. Now, body temperature With the body temperature, if it is too high, the hypothalamus will detect this and it will send information for more sweating, dilation of the blood vessel. What that means is that the blood vessels are going to become larger. The hair on the skin will pretty much relax so that air can flow over easily to cool the body. And of course, again, the reverse. So here we have four examples of positive feedback mechanism and another four examples of negative. That's all that we have on homeostasis, on the negative feedback mechanism. Remember, there are two types of feedback mechanism. Positive feedback mechanism, meaning that you're moving within the direction. Same, more of the same. Negative feedback mechanism, meaning that you're moving opposite to what is happening. So you are trying to reduce something, or possibly you are trying to increase something. So negative is you're going back. You're moving away from what is happening. Positive, you are moving towards what is happening. Thanks so much for joining. Please be reminded to join us. And if you want to be a part of a platform, you can just reach out to me at extremesolutionsja@gmail.com. We do offer classes for biology and human and social biology. We also assist students with labs. Of course, it's at you would have to sign up for that. Good evening and welcome to Mr. Wilson Live. It's another Friday evening with the brightest learners from across the Caribbean. I checked this evening and I might just check now, and I realized that we are in all 16 territories. So we're just going to be naming all these areas this evening to say a big thank you and, of course, welcome to everyone across the Caribbean who makes it their point of duty to be here for our live and other shows. Naming some top areas that we have a hand in, are persons who have interest in these areas. We're going to be naming them. So if you're from these islands that we're going to be calling now, I suggest that you just answer when we say the name of your Caribbean island. I do apologize for that blinking screen that you keep getting, that black coming across the screen. I am not too sure if it's because of my computer resource or if it is because of the free version of StreamYard. Whichever it is, we're going to be here. We're going to try our best to work with the limitation to get the information out. We were just looking at homeostasis, and homeostasis speaks to that way in which the body maintains a constant internal environment. I would have shared on the screen at that time that this is a topic that is always on the paper. It is usually worded in many different ways or take different forms in the way it is asked on the question. So you really don't want to go to a biology exam. And if you observe each time you see me on the live, I'm giving you some pointers as to things that we are sure will be on the exam paper. Of course, I am not affiliated to CXC in any way, shape, or form, other than being a teacher who pretty much looks at the paper from time to time. So we know that there's something going to be on the paper with genetics. It's always there. We know that something is going to be there about high blood pressure and diabetes. It is always there. We know that something is going to be there about ATP. It is always there. And we also know that something is going to be there on the feedback mechanism. Why? Because it's always there. I want to say a special evening to these persons who are always here, and these are names that are submitted by YouTube. So they are saying that Jamaica is always in the house, Trinidad and Tobago is always in the house, Guyana is always in the house, Barbados is always in the house, Grenada is always here. St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Dominica is always here. Antigua and Barbuda is always here. St. Martin is always here. All the way in Africa, Zambia is always here. St. Lucia is always here. And we do have some folks in the United States. St. Kitts and Nevis, they're always here. Cayman Island, they're always here. India, all the way from India, they are always logging on to the TCP YouTube channel, and Turks and Caicos Island, they are always here. So we want to say a big thank you to all these various Caribbean islands who are always here in the house, always supporting the work that Mr. Wilson is doing in one shape or the other. We know that there are 16 territories for CXC, and we're happy to say that we are in all 16 territories. So we just looked at, for those persons who are coming in late, we looked at homeostasis just now. We're going to be looking at variation this evening. And of course, we're going to be looking a little bit at speciation. If you want to know why I'm always coming from the back of the syllabus, because in a lot of cases, the syllabus, they are not completed. In a lot of cases, students are not there as yet. So because I know that, I just do this little added touch to what you already know, to touch things that are at the back of the syllabus. But I can also say that variation is always on the exam. So you realize that I am calling out some topics now. So you want to be here right up to exam, because I'm going to be naming the topics and I'm going to be making my prediction. So I have made mention of a whole lot of topics that we are sure will be on the exam based on trends. All right. So great. I realize that we have some Trini in the house and we have Guyanese in the house. I want to say good evening and welcome. And also we have our usual, the Jamaicans in the house. We want to say a big thank you for being here. As usual, if I am not using a textbook, I am always using my syllabus, because what is written is right. And if I'm going to be engaging you and engaging you in a meaningful way, then it's only natural I'm going to be teaching from the syllabus. So from time to time, I'll be looking down in my syllabus just to make sure that I'm covering the content that is intended by the CSEC examination. So the first thing here I am expected to do, I'm looking at specific objective 3.1. It says, I'm using the biology syllabus this evening. It says, explain how genetic variation arises. And we are supposed to look at sexual reproduction, and we are supposed to look at mutation. Now, as usual, this class is always shared with the students. So I'm always going to be asking questions, and you are going to always be answering as we have a flow through the lesson. So I want to start by asking our first question. What is variation? What's your understanding of variation? That's the first thing we want to look at. Then we are going to be looking at types of variation, as it were, with genetic variation versus environmental variation. And we're going to look at how these influence continuous and discontinuous variation. We know as a fact from time to time on the multiple choice paper, you are going to be seeing somewhere around 50 there about, you're going to be seeing this table usually looking at variation. I'm going to be calling out some examples from the syllabus that we're supposed to look at. And of course, those should help you. I should pretty much form the base on which we study. All right, so I'm still waiting to hear from my team here what's variation. By now, you'd know that if you are waiting too long, then I'm just going to answer and move right along, as time is very, 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 very important for us here. All right, so variation, simply put, refers to the differences that they are among organisms, or the differences that they are between organisms. Now, variation is very, 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 very important for the sustainable, or for the survival of all organisms, because with variation, things become different and become, like we would love to say, adapted to changes in the environment. But variation in itself could be divided into two groups. And as your syllabus is saying, that we're supposed to look at sexual reproduction and we're supposed to look at mutation. Now, variation for the most part is going to be good, because it allows us to pretty much survive to pretty much reproduce. Now, variation might be caused by genetic influences. And when we look at genetic influences, we could look at three things that fall under genetics. We could look at what happens during meiosis. We could look at what happens during sexual reproduction. Or we could look at, as the syllabus is saying, mutation. All right. So when we look at meiosis and variation, we could look at prophase one during meiosis, where we have the process called crossing over taking place, where the chromatids are exchanging genetic information. So that is one place that we're certain that variation would have started as a result of that crossing over there in meiosis. We could also look at the chromosomes arranging on the spindle fiber. This, when we look at the metaphase area there, or when we look at anaphase, the way in which they are moving is pretty much random. And because of this random movement and random assortment, you find that meiosis contributes a whole lot to genetic variation. We could also look at sexual reproduction. During sexual reproduction, I like to start from the point where we are choosing a mate. It's usually random. It's not a case that you're sure that this young lady is always going to be your wife or this young man is always going to be your wife. Probably the person you intended to be that wife or husband. It just didn't work out and you just have to move on. And in itself, that creates some amount of random selection, pretty much leading to some random assortment. And even during the time when the sperm is supposed to fertilize the egg, this again is a random ordeal because no one knows exactly which sperm will be fertilizing which egg. Of course, one will say that the egg is already there in the fallopian tube. Yes, that is true. But we don't know which sperm will be that sperm to be the chosen one. So again, there we are having some variation as a result of fertilization or as a result of sexual reproduction. All right. Now, there's also that which we refer to as mutation, and mutation might be with the genes or with the chromosome. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's not. In more cases than enough, or more cases than not, it is not the most suitable thing for mutation to take place. Mutation occurs because there might be an incorrect alignment of the genes or the DNA, or it might be an substitution or deletion or something or addition. That type of thing could happen with the genes, and that could cause mutation. Now, for most point, mutation can be seen as some abnormal gene. It's an abnormality, one would say. But in the case of the peppered mutt, you would have learned about the peppered mutt. This mutt we spoke about that it had one color, and then because of pollution, it changed to a darker color, that sort of a thing. So that mutation was good. But when you look like sickle cell anemia, cystic fibrosis, hemophilia, all of these things, they are not good. They're not really good. They are going to cause persons to live a very uncomfortable, unhappy. So we look at genetic variation, and we say that there are three leading factors to genetic variation. One is going to be meiosis, the other is going to be sexual reproduction, and the third, of course, is going to be mutation. Now, the other type of variation we want to look at is pretty much a variation that is driven by the environment. And variations that are driven by the environment, they usually they usually include things like your mass, your height, sometimes your skin color, right? And that is, of course, the phenotype there is going to be dependent on your exposure to things in your environment. So when we look at variation, having just touch a bit on environmental variation, when we look at variation, environmental versus genetic variation, it is fair to say that environmental and genetic factor will lead to changes or will determine the phenotype of an organism. Are you with me? Awesome. So what I want you to tell me now are some factors, some traits that are determined by environmental changes, environmental variation. Tell me in the chat. I think you're sleeping. Nobody answered my first question. So I'm out again asking another question. Some traits that are pretty much driven by environmental factors. Explain why genetic variation is important. Okay, soon did I. Okay, you're still here. All right, so what I want to know about some traits that are pretty much influenced or driven by environmental factors. I made mention that, of course, temperature could affect the way an organism look, the way an organism develop. Uh, Light intensity, again, could determine what plant grow where. All right, so Anna is here. All right, so variation is going to be important, as I said when I started out, to ensure that organisms are able to adapt to changes in the environment. Another thing that makes variation very important is that it pretty much forms a platform on which natural selection is going to develop. Another thing is that with variation, it makes it less likely for an organism to be, or a population to be totally wiped out if the population were supposed to be affected by some ills in the or some ill in the environment. For example, if you were supposed to think about COVID-19, not everyone will, of course, catch COVID-19. Whether these persons are wearing masks or otherwise, not everyone will catch COVID-19. There are some persons who will just naturally have that resistance and it just will not affect them. Are you with me? Great. So another question I have for you, though you have not been answering my questions, another question I have for you, I want to know what is continuous variation. This is a question that is asked on the HSB paper from time to time. What is continuous variation? Or can you make that distinction for me between continuous and discontinuous variation? Sir, the topic is new to me because our class is not that far in the syllable. So I'm unable to answer the question. I understand, and that is why we have been looking at the back of the syllabus so as to ensure that at least logging on to the show, you're not getting iterated information, but instead you are getting information that, like you say, it is new and you can go and read on it, knowing that this is a part of the syllabus. This is something to be completed for both biology and HSB. Variation is both a biology topic and a HSB topic. So usually I try to find a topic that is fitting for both subjects to teach on the live. So I made mention of some factors that pretty much will drive environmental variation. We look at light, we looked at temperature. I think I said those. We looked at, I said, Riri would have written water. All right, so water could probably help with the phenotype of what an organism look like or where the organism live, that sort of a thing. That will definitely drives that will definitely drive variation. The variation continues to increase. Not sure where that is going. Example high. Oh, so you are saying continuous variation continues to increase. So with continuous variation, there is a continuum. There is no break, so to speak, in the, I want to say data set, or there's no break, so to speak, in the phenotype that we are studying. What it means is that you're going to be having a midpoint, and it, in most cases, can form a bell curve that shows a normal distribution. Now, with continuous variation, let me give you an example. When we say that it is continuum, there is no midpoint. There is a midpoint. Sorry, there's a midpoint. Let me just read what Riri has here. Continuous variation is where characteristics show a continuous graduation from one extreme to the other without a break. Awesome, that's fine. I'm going to show you, I'll be showing something at you in a short while. I'm going to be showing the one at you. I think it was on the 2020 paper or on the 2021 paper. I'm going to give you that genetic question and let me see how well you're going to treat with it. But I'm going to give you after I would have completed talking about variation. So if we were supposed to look at the height of an individual or the height of individuals in the population, then it's only natural that you are going to have some persons here, 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 some persons here. Or we could say you might have a person who's 5 feet 1, 5 feet 2, 5 feet 3, 5 foot 4, 5 feet, and you realize that we are going up bit by bit by bit by bit. So there is some continuation. There's no clear demarcation that we are going to stop here, and it's going to be either this or it's going to be that. All right. So continuous variation, it has a continuum, and examples of these are wow. All right, great. I'm saying wow. I didn't just want to give you some random examples. I wanted to give you some from the syllabus, but I'll also give you some from my head. So we talk about some type of variation, continuous. Once it can be measured, I like to say that. So if you can measure mass, it's a continuous variation. If you can measure the length of something, it is pretty much continuous variation. If you can measure the degree of something, the degree as in like a circle, the degree, the angle, that sort of a stuff. Once it can be measured, I think it's a fair thing to say that it is continuous variation. Because if you have varying degree, then you understand there is some continuum. All right. So in your syllabus is saying that we're supposed to be able to distinguish between continuous and discontinuous variation. It says, and you are now going to tell me whether this is, well, I told you about continuous. I should have said discontinuous. I'll tell you a little bit about discontinuous before we move on into some examples. So a discontinuous variation, unlike continuous variation, it does not show a continuum, right? It's either this or that or that. If you observe, I went this or that, and I was at like 3, and it could have been more. Because oftentimes when we teach or learn this idea or the concept of discontinuous variation, the first thing you hear is that it is either yes or no. And yes or no sometimes can be a little tricky. And I'm going to show you why. So you can see my chin, I hope. There is a little indentation here, a little sinking in a lot of person's chin. So this is what we refer to as cleft chin. So cleft chin is going to be either you have it or you don't have it. All right, so that's a discontinuous variation. If you look at lobeness, so you are looking now at my ears, right? So it's either you have attached earlobe or detached earlobe. So this is another example of discontinuous variation. Now, if you look, you might have a widow's peak, where you have this little peak coming out right here. It's either you're going to have it or you don't have it, right? You might have ball, right? It's either you have it or you don't have it. You might be freckled face, those brown color person, and I like blood group coming up. It's either you have it or you don't have it. What about hitchhiker's thumb? Your thumb might be able to flick back way or it just can't flick back way. All right, it's either you have it or you don't have it. So you realize there's a clear trend showing you discontinuous variation, and in almost all the cases I have shown, it's either yes or no. But just like we're seeing on the screen from Abigail, Abigail is now saying blood group. Now, blood group shows discontinuous variation. But look at dimples is another one. Nice. Yeah, dimples is another one. It's either you have it or you don't have it. But when you look at blood group could be AB. Go with me. It could be A. Uh-huh. It could be B. Uh-huh. It could be O. Uh-huh. And though the phenotype, I'm going to add something else. The phenotype will not really show this, but I'm going to show you on that. And then it could also be that. Now look at all these blood groups. All right. Look at all these blood groups. All right. So your blood group could be AB. It's a clear distinction. It could be A. It's a clear distinction. It could be B. It's a clear distinction. And of course, it could be A with the recessive allele O being attached to it, or it could have been B with the recessive allele O there being attached to it. So you're seeing there, I would have just put it in the chat, but let me put it on the screen there. So blood group, this too is a discontinuous variation. And if you observe there, in this case with the blood group, you're not seeing just two things to choose from. All right. You're seeing, let me see if I can count, 1, 2, 3, about 6 different phenotype. Well, it's not really 6 different phenotype. This is 6 different genotype, right? That you can choose from. Now, if we were supposed to look at the phenotype, well, I don't want to touch phenotype. I don't know if you touched that already. I don't want to touch that. I wanted to have a class on that, but of course it's a paid class. It's going to be a day marathon. You'd have to call me for that. And if you want to be a part of that genetics class, which is a paid marathon, which I'm going to touch everything on genetics for the CXC syllabus, you can send me a WhatsApp there and I will tell you the cost and when it will be and all of that. It will be in the Easter break sometime next week. All right. So let's get back to the math at hand. So we spoke about continuous variation. We spoke about discontinuous variation. Now, what I want to tell you now, I want to talk now about matching up continuous and the discontinuous variation with with a variation that is caused by genetics that are driven by genetics, or variation that's driven by the environment. So let's do that very quickly. Before I move on, however, eye color is sometime on the multiple choice paper. It's usually sometime on the biology, on the paper, whichever one of the paper, whether it be HSB, paper 1 or paper 2. Yes, like we have many phenotype and genotype for blood color. Yes, we have many for the eyes. But the thing about the eye, we tend to call the eye polygenesis. And in most cases, when they're asking you about any continuous or discontinuous variation, eye color is not a part. Take that as almost gospel. Well, on your CXC paper, when they're asking you about variation and you're seeing eye color is not a part of any of the answer that they're looking for, unless it is a not question. All right. So if it is not or should not be, then, but if it's a positive that we're going for, in most cases, the eye color is not a part of that. The choice you should make. So tongue rolling, this is where we're going. Is it influenced by genetic or is it influenced by the environment? Let's go with that very quickly. If it is continuous variation, then naturally it will be influenced by the environment. If it is continuous variation, then naturally it will be influenced by the environment in most cases. If it is discontinuous variation, it will be influenced by genetics. If it is discontinuous variation, like we spoke about, dimple, freckles, ear, blah, 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 it will be influenced by genetics. With that said, I am going to ask you just to assist me with some things that we're seeing in the syllabus here. And for those persons who would have done the lab for biology, the genetics lab for biology, I'm sure these are going to come to you very easy. So foot size, is it continuous or discontinuous variation? Tell me in the chat. And you're going to say what it is. Foot size, continuous or discontinuous variation? A cattle that has horn or does not have horn, is this continuous or discontinuous variation? I feel like I'm logging. Nobody's answering. What's happening? All right, while I wait on the answers and listen to Anai being a very rude boy, I want to remind us that I am Mr. Wilson. You are watching Mr. Wilson live. You are watching Mr. Wilson live. I am streaming from Jamaica. I cover topics from the C6 syllabus for both biology and human and social biology. If you want to be a part of my marathon, you can reach me on screen. You're seeing that number there on screen. You can send me a WhatsApp, or you can just go on over to my website. It is at TCP. It's going across the screen now. tcpacademy.teachable.com, and you can see the courses that we offer over there. Uh, we love to see you. We love to see you. We love you to join our class, which is about our marathon class. Like I've said, we have a marathon class planned for genetics. I realize that a whole lot of persons are saying, I am just at reproduction or somewhere there on the syllabus. We're saying that we're here, we're ready for you. Just ring us up, just give us a call, just send us a WhatsApp in a matter of fact. Calling is sort of futile. Uh, Send me a WhatsApp message. We have planned a class for next week. We're going to be looking at the various inheritances, be it sex inheritance, be it sex link, be it dominance, be it recessive. We're going to be looking at the Punnett square. We're going to be looking at the pedigree chart. And let me tell you, you can't come to my genetics class and leave and not master it. This is almost impossible unless your brain is not working. Once you come to my genetics class, anybody I have the genetics class with, it's a win-win. All right, and we're going to be looking at some of the questions that are on the past papers and see how best you can master it. We want to do that for a day next week, so I encourage you to send me a WhatsApp message. My number is on screen if you want to join this day of marathon, looking at that part of the syllabus. All right, so let me see what we have been saying. We have been saying so far that foot size is continuous variation. There are some persons who are convinced that it's continuous variation. There are persons who are convinced that it is discontinuous variation. Seeing continuous variation, continuous variation, continuous variation, continuous variation. So then I'll have to talk to Grateful, Forever Grateful. I want you to tell me, I want you to defend your point. Tell me why. Defend your point. You are the only person saying that it is discontinuous variation. I want you to defend that point for me. Don't be afraid. Defend your point. Right? And then I'm going to randomly choose somebody from the continuous, and I'm going to ask that person. I'm seeing Barry Brown said continuous twice. So I am going to ask Barry Brown also to defend his point. All right. Why is it continuous variation for you? And why is it discontinuous variation Forever Grateful? Just tell me in the chat while we wait on you to defend those points. We're going to be asking persons to answer another question. And the question, because it is distinct. Whoa. All right. So now we're going to ask you another question. What should we understand from this thing? We don't want to know what you understand from this thing. We want to know what is it that you're expecting us to understand from this thing. All right, so we want to know as well whether or not the presence or absence of horn in cattle is that continuous or discontinuous variation. Barry Brown, are you going to defend your point? And we want you to tell us on screen whether the presence or absence of horn in cattle, if it is continuous or discontinuous variation. All right, so we want you to join us next week. Remember, you can send me a message via WhatsApp. My number was on screen just now. I'll put it there. If you have interest in joining our genetics class, so if genetics is giving you any trouble and you want us to assist you with genetics, you can send me a message to be a part of that class. It's nice if when you send me that message, you tell me whether or not you're an adult learner, where you're calling from, and of course, tell me what's your interest. I have a lot of persons messaging me daily. So if you don't tell me your interest, I might see it and don't even know what is it that you're responding to. All right. So I'm seeing a message here. It just says good night, sir. I'm not too sure which class or who this message is coming from. So please, just tell me who you are, where you're from, what school, whether you're adult learner, otherwise, what's your interest. All right. Awesome. All right. So Barry decides to defend this point because it's passed from one gene to another or to other. Ah, well, none of the explanation is really nice. None of the explanation. So that tells me that persons are still guessing because everyone doesn't have the same size. Okay, I see. All right, so it means therefore, it means therefore that we don't understand the question that was asked. A lot of persons would have answered, but it's a mere guess. So let me do that again. With with continuous variation, there's a continuum. What that means is that I like to say that it has a midpoint. So you can go from 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6. So there's this continuation of it, right? There's no fix stop, it just keep going, or it can just keep going. An example of this would have been a person's body mass. Then the baby would have a mass, and as the baby grows, you'll realize that the mass is increasing, 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 that sort of a thing. But pretty much if the baby had attached earlobe, it's just always going to be attached. And if a baby did not have attached earlobe, then the baby just would never have attached earlobe, right? So if we have a continuum, as in their height or size, once you can measure it, I like to say, once there's a quantity to be measured, all right, it could be in a range, it could be well, in a range, yes, it could be in mass, it could be in height, that sort of a thing. You can measure that thing, then we consider that to be continuous variation. With discontinuous variation now, there is no continuum, there's no midpoint. So it's either it's going to be that, that, or that, or that, right? And it doesn't have this big set as a continuous variation would have had. So the set for this continuous variation is usually smaller than that set for continuous variation. As I said, it's just continuing. All right, awesome. So we wanted to find out from you, and we gave an example that was somewhat an anomaly, or probably doesn't fit in what I said, and it was the example of blood type. When we said that blood type, the ABO blood type, of course, will have it's of course discontinuous variation. However, it is not just as simple as saying yes or no, because there are many groups to choose from. All right, and many groups, but it is still not as big as anything that is measured with continuous variation. Our continuous variation would have been influenced. I would have been influenced by continuous variation. So what we did after we did that, we'd ask you, I'm looking at the syllabus. So I asked from the syllabus, uh, I wanted you to tell me whether or not foot size was continuous. I wanted to find out whether foot size was continuous or discontinuous variation. So some person said it was, some person said that it wasn't. So I'll just answer for you. It is actually continuous variation because your foot size, if you put somebody to stand beside you and somebody else to stand beside you, the possibility that you all have different foot size is really, really, really great. So it is continuous variation. All right? Continuous variation. Now, that person we standing beside you and we're measuring the feet of these persons. All these persons will have different size. But do you know that the ear attachment might be different for everyone? Two of them might have attached earlobe. One might have detached earlobe. All three might have attached earlobe. All three might have detached earlobe. But the range or the set that we're going to be selecting from here, it's pretty small. It's either going to be the person has it or the person does not. All right. And then we spoke about the cattle having horn or hornless. Now that clearly the set is very, very small. That is, of course, going to be discontinuous variation. All right. All right. Discontinuous variation has a limit. All right. That's a nice way to say it. And then the other thing we wanted to look at is pod size. You know, like a legume, the size, once you start talking now about size, that is going to be continuous variation. Now, tongue rolling. Now, a lot of persons become confused when we talk about tongue rolling because persons are saying, but I can learn to roll my tongue, and that is environment. So because it's environment, then that could not have been, I think I answered a multiple choice question like that, then it could not have been a discontinuous variation because if I continue doing this, then my tongue, I'll learn to roll my tongue. But when you learn to roll your tongue, bear in mind, it's either going to be you can roll your tongue or you can't roll your tongue. All right. So you understand that the set here is very, very small and there is no midpoint. It's either you can roll your tongue or you can't roll your tongue. And then the other thing we want to look at, it says leaf size. And once we say leaf size, then that is going to be continuous variation. And it said that we are supposed to mention genetic and environmental factors, and we did that already. So I do hope that we're clear on that now. The difference between continuous and discontinuous variation, and also to match them up with the environmental influence versus the genetic influence. What I want to look at now is something that in most cases it is left untouched on the syllabus, probably in some schools, not all schools. And this is not the end of the syllabus, but we are very close to the end. All right. I think after I touch this topic that I'm touching, now we're just going to have one more topic in the biology syllabus to touch. So you realize that I am really at the back of the biology syllabus, covering that content. Uh, all right, awesome. Thank you very much. What I want to look at now is speciation. Have you ever heard the word speciation? What does it mean? Speciation. So for your syllabus, it wants me to define a species. It says include biological species, concept of group that are closely related organisms that are able to interbreed and produce fertile offspring. So naturally, a species, I won't refer to species, it refers to the smallest biological unit, one would say. Not that we're talking about cells, all right, that are able to interbreed and produce viable or fertile offspring. What that means, if the organisms are of the same species, when they mate, the offspring that they have should be able to mate as well and produce an offspring. Now, once this can happen, then we say that these organisms are of the same species. So can I just give you some trouble here? I'll start with something that probably you know. So if we were supposed to mate the donkey and the horse, what type of offspring would we get? What's the name of that offspring? So species that have unique characteristics. That is not so much of a good one, Williams, because we all have unique characteristics. Remember that we go through variation. So because we go through variation, we all have something that is pretty unique. There are some things, if you even look at your fingerprint, yeah. All right, so I had asked just now, when we mate a donkey and a horse, what's produced? We get a mule. And that mule will not be able to reproduce and have an, uh, will not be able to reproduce. Now, I have seen in literature where where they are saying it's like a 1 in 500 chance that that mule will be able to produce an offspring. And usually, if the mule is able to produce an offspring, genetically it is so weak that usually it just does not survive. Genetically, it is so weak that usually it just does not survive. All right. So the takeaway here, or the endowing understanding, is that a species refers to a set of organisms that are able to interbreed and produce viable offspring, or produce offspring that themselves can produce offspring. I hope that is clear. So, because a lot of persons here would be doing biology, I'm just going to go back to taxonomy, and we are going to talk about two rats. There are two rats, R-A-T. And we're going to put these two rats together, and I want you to tell me whether or not they are the same species. I'm going to be calling their botanical name or their scientific name, whichever one you want to look at it as. Uh, these two rats are Rattus rattus and Rattus navincicus. Can these two rats interbreed and produce viable offspring? Yes or no, it's fine. Rattus rattus and Rattus navincicus. Rattus rattus and Rattus navincicus. Are they able to interbreed and produce viable offsprings? All right, if you're just joining, I am Mr. Wilson from CSEC Biology at TCP. You can find us online at tcp-academy.teachable.com. Of course, you can sign up for classes for January exams or be it May, June exams. You can also just sign up to do a single course, a single topic. You can sign up to do your labs. You can sign up for assistance there. If you are doing your alternative to SBAs for both biology and HSB, of course, you can sign up and we can assist you with that. So we offer just that which you need. You choose with your money, you say what it is that you want to look at, and then we coin a program that fits you, and then we contact you and we start the engagement. So we have a product just for you. If there's one thing in biology or HSB that is giving you trouble, just send me a WhatsApp message and let us see how best we can assist you in overcoming that hurdle. So these two organisms will not interbreed. Rattus rattus and Rattus navincicus, they will not interbreed. Rattus, the first part is the genus name, and the last part is the species name. Rattus navincicus, first part is a genus name, last part is the species name. So if we observe, these two rats are of the same genus. But when we get to the species, Rattus versus navincicus, it's different. So these two organisms will not interbreed. Now, one will ask, what would have caused this? There are two rats. Why is it that they can't interbreed? Now, I'm going to be using your syllabus. Like, I really don't want to go wide. I really want to use your syllabus. Let me see if I missed anything. Give an example of species of birds and plant that can interbreed. All right, so we spoke about, you can have the zebra and the donkey you call zonkey. You have the lion and the tiger you call lion and tiger. What is that called? Lion and tiger? Nobody's talking to me tonight. I feel like I am talking to myself. A mix of lion and tiger, that's liger, right? And of course, that one will not be able to interbreed. And then there are some plants that are able to interbreed. You have some owls, some ducks, so on. You have some plants creating peppermint and so on. Those are, you have a lot of plants that are able to interbreed. I'm going to be naming some in a short while, but I want to pretty much answer to what would have caused these two rats not being able to interbreed. And with that said, it's time for us to answer, what is speciation? So when we talk about speciation, simply put, it's just the formation of new species. So how is it that new species are formed? Now we're going to be talking about two ways, and this is in no way the finite journey to this chapter. But for your syllabus, we're going to be looking at two ways in which species are formed. Based on your syllabus, it is saying describe how new species are formed. It says two types. All right. It says speciation caused by physical geographical separation, such as a river forming, colonizing a new island, or rise of mountain range, occurs with loss of habitat or the formation of a new species. So that is the first type of speciation that we're going to be looking at. The type of speciation that is pretty much driven by geographical isolation. And when there's geographical isolation, there is no flow in the genes. Now, I know that some persons are saying, what the hell is this man talking about now, Jesus? So I am not even going to go like CXC, because CXC likes sometimes to sort of trivialize some stuff. So they are talking about the first part, and I'm going to read it and break it down for you again. And then I'm going to give you one word, and then you can just go to YouTube and find that word, and you're going to be fine. So they are saying you're supposed to look at two types of speciation. They did not give you the names, but I am going to give you the names. The two types of speciation we are going to look at. First one, geographical isolation, is called allopathic. Allopathic. It's not in the syllabus, but that's the name. Allopathic. Allopatric. Allopathic. So allopathic is pretty much when there's isolation, and the isolation is pretty much as a result of pretty much habitat separating, probably by a river, probably by a stream, probably by a mountain range. As is said in your syllabus, it says speciation caused by physical geographical separation, such as a river. So there's a river that now runs between the land and those organisms that are on this side, they no longer can get to this side. So what happens that over time, these two, though they are the same species now, over time they will evolve to become different, and after a while they just can't mate to produce fertile offspring. Colonizing a new island. Like you know that the Caribbean is noted for its rich level of endemism, because the little islands are just in their little pockets. So you have Jamaica here, you'll have Trinidad down there, you'll have Guyana over there, and you might have some animals that pretty much look alike, but they don't breed. If you were supposed to look at the bird that is called the Meadow Lake, you have the East Meadow Lake and, of course, the West Meadow Lake. These birds look exactly the same. But these birds, we are going to look at them in the other type of isolation. Even though they look the same, they really don't mate. They are different species. All right, and we're going to be talking about that in the next part. But I'm not comfortable that you're comfortable with the first part that I spoke about, which is allopathic. And we said that allopathic speciation is as a result of geographical isolation. So a river dividing two landmass, a stream dividing two landmass, a mountain range dividing two landmass. These are the popular examples that are used for the formation of new species. Then over time, these species will evolve to a point where they will no longer be able to mate and produce successful offspring as they would have if they were pretty much in the same area. So there's a barrier that is created because of this. We spoke about river, ocean, sea, desert, all that. All those are some examples that would lead to geographical isolation or geographical separation. So this part of the syllabus that I'm touching now, speciation, is just biology. It's not for the HSB syllabus. It's just biology. And I'm going to be out of here pretty soon. All right, so we spoke about allopathic. I would say that this one has to do with geographical isolation. The other one we want to look at, which is not the name is not in the syllabus, but the description of the isolation of the speciation, sorry, is in the syllabus. So what the syllabus says, and this is on page 41 of your syllabus, biology syllabus, it says speciation caused by ecological behavior difference, such as courtship behavior, difference in coloration, slight difference there in some organism. We spoke about the meadow lake. You want to look at that bird on Google. Note over time, species can also go extinct due to hunting, habitat loss, disease, for example, the Caribbean monk seal. So we're not going to be looking at that part today. We're just looking at the two types of speciation. And the second speciation, which is of course brought about by behavioral isolation, or we could look at pre-zygotic isolation, or we could look at, of course, post-zygotic isolation. This type of speciation is referred to as sympatric. There are two types of isolation that your syllabus wants you to look at. One, allopatric. And I give you these names for you to find them easy on the internet. You can just watch a video with them. Allopatric, and the other is sympatric. Now, speciation, these are topics for the biology syllabus and not for the HSB syllabus. Now, with sympatric, the organism might just pretty much find a different habitat within the same location. You might find that this organism now spending more time in water, and as such, there is some barrier that is created, and it's pretty much affect courtship. It could be a change in the mating call. It could be a change in the mating dance. It could be a change in the coloration. And the list goes on and on as to things that could have happened that would have caused this isolation within the same area. So though they are in the same area, they are having this isolation, and it is referred to as sympatric or behavioral speciation. And then after behavioral speciation, we have geographical speciation. And we say that geographical speciation is known as allopatric. Behavioral speciation is known as sympatric. All right. Now, this is pretty much where we are going to be leaving you this evening. I am hoping that we're going to be able to meet next week. I think I am hearing a lot of persons saying that I am nowhere on the syllabus. I understand that. But regardless of the many limitations that you have, I want to say to you, don't give up. Don't give up. Keep going. Work those past papers. Probably you need to talk to your teacher. Probably you need to enroll to one of my platform, one of my classes. I'm here giving you some assistance. But if you need more, you can pretty much ring me up. Send me a WhatsApp. My number is on screen, and we can talk about a program for you. Or you can join our online platform. We have classes for human and social biology on a Wednesday and a Sunday, and we have paid classes for biology on Thursdays and Sundays. So you realize that we're here for you. We're always online. You might not see us. We have paid classes, but I try to find some time to give back. I would have given back or tried to give back on a Friday night or Saturday night as my availability will allow. So thank you very much for joining. Again, good evening. Please tell me more about the marathon. Please WhatsApp me. The number is on screen. We can talk about the marathon. Simply put, the marathon, you're going to be looking at some past papers, and we're going to be continuing the content in the class. Because sometimes we're looking at past paper and we really don't have the content, and it sort of affects us. So we're looking at some past paper, as in paper 1, paper 2. You can go to my Teachable platform and you will have an idea of some of the past papers that we're going to be looking at. To find out more, like I say, just WhatsApp me. The number is on screen, and we can talk more about your interest in our marathon, our paid classes, enrolling for January, enrolling for May, June next year, or pretty much assisting you with your labs, be it biology or HSB. we are here for you, or to pretty much assist you with a topic. If there's a topic that is giving you trouble, your teacher went a little fast, you missed class, or anything like that, and you need our assistance, we're here. Just WhatsApp us and we will tell you what's the cost and we can take it from there. Thanks much again for joining. I am Mr. Wilson from TCP Academy. You can find us online at tcp-academy.teachable.com. On YouTube, you can find us at CSEC Biology TCP, or you can send us a mail at extremesolutionsja@gmail.com. You may also send us a WhatsApp at 1-876-219-5191. Lastly, nobody collects money for TCP unless it's one of the reputable institutions that we will give you as soon as we have a face-to-face conversation. So please don't go sending money to persons saying that they are collecting on my behalf. Nobody collects on my behalf. Only the reputable agencies. And when you call us, we have that and I give you the details. And from there, the detail is pretty much unique to each person. All right. Thanks so much for joining. Good evening.